What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Filip, Latocha, and today I am recapping a 5K race that I did in very early April that I just kind of kept rolling back and was still kind of processing my thoughts about. And now, as I'm approaching much longer, more endurance-based races coming up this summer, I wanted to reflect on a little bit of this local race, just kind of as a fun story, just kind of explaining some of the things that happened, lessons learned, and the things I've picked up from that race that have ultimately helped me in the long run starting now. So before we get into it, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're subscribed to the channel watching the content, thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Let's get into this whole story. So the race was my first local race in my new neighborhood, about 5 minutes from my house, driving from Algonquin into Lake in the Hills, kind of a nice drive out west. And it's called Run Through the Hills 5K. And based on what I saw on the website, I guess there was a 10K version of this race at some point or another. I would have opted in for the 10K if it was an option, but I figured a local race, 5K, kind of just see what's going around, meet some runners in my neighborhood, and basically just kind of have a good time, see what happens with it. And knowing what I knew about the course a few days beforehand, I know that I was almost opting out of racing. Not because of the course, just because, there's just some morale issues that kind of happen during your race week. Sometimes you're either really hyped for a race and you're psyched and you're just ready to go and you can't wait to race. Or some days you're just like, man, I'm going to probably opt out of this one. Like, there's a few challenges here that logically, like, I'll take the L on social medias and things like that for not doing the race, but prioritizing something else in the process, like maybe training for a bigger race, and this race is conflicting with the schedule in some way. It happens. I understand it. That's kind of the thought process. But here, I saw the course and I said, Jesus, like, I've never trained through massive hills like this particular course has in, like, the city of Chicago. So everything I've been doing right now includes a lot more hills, a lot more elevation, minus some segments of, like, my running trails where it's a little bit more flat and you can practice some speed. Now it's all mixed up. So on this course, there was approximately 200 feet of climbing, give or take, but they were very steep hills in very specific areas of the course. So I'll kind of just give you the cap from the beginning of the race all the way to the end. I'll just kind of give some of my thoughts, my feelings on it. So I get to the race, we get kind of to the area where the race starts, which is like behind one of these like superstores. It follows like a path, and then it gets into the cul-de-sac where this race loop begins, which is like close to the swimming start of the Lake in the Hills triathlon when it was still a thing. So basically, this is just something maybe I guess a lot of people do, but I know I'm totally a culprit for doing this, is that I would like to scope out what the competition looks like at a local race to see who I'm going to be riding with for the majority of the race, who's going to be like the guy who walks in there and, is a very passionate runner and really will just like smoke the first half mile and then kind of fade away. Like, I like doing that just to kind of assess. And obviously one of the good ways is kind of measuring by who's wearing what kind of shoes, people's body types, what they're kind of rolling into the race with. You typically have a good idea. And what I saw in the first 45 minutes of me being at that race was that the competition didn't look like it was going to be too bad. I know there were a few CrossFit runners who were, just running and jogging the entire time. I'm like, guys, chill out. Like, we have a 5K race. You got to go fast. We're not trying to go for a long period of time, but, whatever. I digress. There were some people that looked like your average everyday runner. So 10 minutes before the race, I'm thinking, okay, I think I've got this in the bag. There doesn't look like anyone that's going to potentially smoke me at this race. And then it happens. I see this kid come in who looks like he's about my age, if not a little bit younger. He's got the split shorts. He's got a pair of Alpha Flies. I'm wearing Vaporfly 2 next percents in this, just so you know. And he's like doing his warm-ups. I'm like, all right, it's coming down to me and that kid. Like 1, 2 in some sort of order is happening with this guy, because this guy looks like a legitimate, like, semi-pro athlete. So, the gun goes off, we send it off, and the front pack is kind of slow. It's obviously the very passionate guys who kind of sprinted it, but they're not sprinting very fast. So I make a conscious decision within like the first half mile to get into the front pack and see what happens. And as I'm looking back and we're kind of trailing the 4x4 that's kind of leading us around the course, lo behold, that guy is right there with me. He's kind of running behind me. And now I'm thinking, okay, I don't want him working off me in these high wind, slightly cool conditions. I want him to be next to me or in front of me because he's a little bit taller and he'll break the wind for me. So I start zigzagging just on the course a little bit just to kind of break him off. And then, of course, he does get next to me. I'm like, all right, perfect. At least in this case, we're going to have kind of more of an even fight, and I'm not giving him the advantage. It's going to be good now. So first mile rolls in. I think we run maybe like a 5:30, 5:45. Nothing spectacular, but we're just having a good time, right? By the time we're approaching mile 1.5, the hills really start beginning, and this is where my problems on the course start beginning. Not necessarily blaming the course for anything, just my lack of experience on this, is that this kid just fully sent himself down the hills. Like, he just put his arms out just a little bit and just kind of went with it. And he had like the turnover to manage to handle the downhills here. Whereas I was typically braking on the downhills because I didn't want to like slip or trip or in any sort of way and just end my race on the spot. So my handling of the downhills was not very great, but as I got closer to the flatter sections, I could like turn over a little bit more, gain some speed, and try to use that speed to carry myself up the hill. Now, he was also very good at climbing the hills. I was not that great at climbing the hills, but we're holding a very far out lead from everyone else in the 1 and 2 spots right now. So I see myself definitely fading, and as the race keeps going in this long mile between mile 1 and 2, it's just getting worse and worse. The gap is extending, and now I'm kind of finding myself in no man's land. And as we take like the third down to uphill on this course, I feel like my stomach's turning over and it just feels like I'm going to vomit. And I don't know if it was because of just the high impact of running downhill and having your legs just kind of like punching back at your gut, or it was just like some sort of dietary thing in the morning. I just don't know what happened. Or yeah, dietary, I mean like I had an empty stomach. I didn't eat anything before the race. I don't know what happened, but I felt like I was going to puke, and I was just like, I just kept on, dry heaving while I was running like at 6:20 pace. Or 6:15 pace. I wonder what it says here on, oh yeah, it looks like 6:15 pace. And essentially, it's not a good time. And I'm like 1.5 to 2 miles into this race. I'm like, how is this happening? Like, we just started. Why am I, like, dying here? So now we think the worst is over, but it's not. Like, I passed mile 2, and I've done previous scoutings of this course previously on some of my training routes, and I kind of knew where they did this turn from mile 2 into mile 3.1, where it's this gradual uphill climb through like a more suburban cul-de-sac, just a straightaway gradual climb. And I knew at this point in time, with the race conditions, with us getting a headwind at this downhill, that there was just no way I was going to PR during this 5K. It was just not going to happen. I was not going to catch the guy in front, and like the gap was just massive now. And like I'm kind of looking back sometimes to make sure number 3 isn't really catching up to us, and I see number 3 is like struggling a little bit more than me. Go figure, right? So this long straightaway from mile 2 to mile 3 is just, it's just hell on earth. Like, I'm still trying to maintain a pace where I'm not going to basically hurl half my guts out, but I'm also running a pace where I can keep my distance from 3, because there's no way my pace is going to catch up with number 1. Number 1 is like consistently busting 5:45, 5:50s at this point. So once that section is over with, like my stomach finally calms down. And part of this race also was like a 1 mile dog walk kind of a thing. So now I'm like dodging people and their dogs and just kind of yelling, trying to get across. And once we're in the flat sections of the course by the very end, I can finally get my turnover back that I had at the beginning of the race. And I finished the race in what felt like a pretty strong second. But I was not happy with my race results overall. And based on what I see on my Strava here, it looks like my watch time was about 19 minutes, 18 seconds, which, that's like, it's a good like training tempo session for me, but that's not a good race pace whatsoever. And like based on the course and all things considered and like my heart rate, there was just no way it was going to get any better than this. And that's the trouble with it overall, is that sometimes you win them, sometimes you lose them, and if you change the environment in which you race or train in, it's going to affect your results in the long run here. So what are some of the major lessons I learned from this race that I will be taking with me into future races? Well, one, of course, is that I should probably try to eat something an hour or two beforehand that's pretty light but can keep my stomach stabilized. So what I've been experimenting with was like different variations of like just plain old rice cakes with salt, and those have been working really well. They hold the stomach down pretty well. I've made sure to keep coffee out of my pre-race routine because it's a little more acidic. And you know, there's a couple of other things I put in my coffee that I would rather not have during race day, like half and half. So having like that kind of cream, just having some kind of like pasteurized milk cream product is probably not great. Also pre-race, I don't know how others take it, but I think keeping it as basic as possible is probably ideal. I will still race with a little bit of pre, just like a very minimal amount, just for more of like, just kind of getting, I guess, the caffeine boost out of it, getting a little bit of, I guess, the thermal effects if necessary. But the thermal you want to watch out with mostly just because if it is a hot day, what's the point of taking a thermal? You're just going to sweat even more, right? Unless you just want to have like unless you want to turn your race into like a really good workout for later on. But that's kind of my case in point, just like very minimal pre, just to have a little bit of the caffeinated buzz to it. Other things, you know, just keep training with hills, but when you live out here, also be more conscious of mixing flat runs with rolling hills training in addition to hill sprints. So yeah, just be conscious of that. Like, train on the course, or train on a style course that you're going to race on. That's pretty important overall. So yeah, those are my main lessons from it. And like, yeah, again, this is a hard fought second during this 5K race, and like, I'm not very happy with my result, but I am happy that I managed to get the race done and just have a really good time with it. And realistically, the reason I make this video too is because I am starting to lead into my more, you know, summer race season, as I am approaching my Silverthorne training camp, kind of like I did last year. Probably won't be out there as long this year, but you know, I've got like a Lake Zurich triathlon near my house that I'm planning on doing. We've got the Chicago triathlon. I've got Ironman Madison 70.3. I've got the Chicago Marathon as well. That's going to be a big block of stuff that I want to talk about in another video, and that's going to lead into Tokyo 2022, of course. And yeah, it's just important to reflect on some of these smaller races on a more microscopic level to see how you can expand to make those little mistakes preventable in a large-scale race. Given the fact that, you know, in a large-scale race, there's some other factors to consider, like water intake, more nutrition during the race, question mark, things like that. So that's something to also consider. And then I guess, yeah, I do have Chicago 13.1 that I'm kind of considering opting out of. It is this week at the time of this filming of this video. I just don't know if I want to just travel to Chicago to do this particular race on that particular course. I am signed up, so you would think I would do it, but I'm just kind of up in the air about it. I guess we'll see in the next 48 hours if I pick up my packet or not and show up for that race. So I digress. That's kind of where I'm going to leave that note. So yeah, that's where we're going to leave this video. Overall, it was a fun 5K. I would definitely do it again. Kind of in the same conditions, just try to fix the mistakes where I've had them. Continue training on the roads and routes that I have right now. And hopefully I'll have better results in the future. So thanks for sticking around for this 5K story. If you guys got any cool race stories or cool races coming up, if you're doing Chicago 13.1 and you think it's going to be a good time, let me know in the comments below. Or any of the races I mentioned previously. You know, I'd be cool to see you guys there if you're around. So I'll leave this video here. Thanks so much for watching. See you guys in the next one.